mayor of Afghanistan in Nili and built a road so that pregnant women could easily reach a clinic while she celebrated 8th of March, International Women's Day. We were delighted when Humaira created the very first women's news agency, and when Zahra created the first green home, mobilizing youth for saving the environment. We have held so many campaigns. Women's 50% campaign in elections, unveiling Afghanistan, the unheard voices of progress, 150 interviews portraying what the women say. A 60-day campaign on defining sexual and gender-based violence. We founded the publishing house, the first one ever. Why? Because the Taliban burnt books. We focused on creating a dedicated library and a reference of serious, useful, and not available sources for the very first time on women's rights and human rights. We made sure that each 300,000 free copies of our books reached the right hands around the country. We have been consulting with at least 25,000 young people through 200 public seminars, 1/3 of which were direct dialogues between experts, officials, civil society actors, women's activists, the young generation of Afghanistan, talking about what the women say. We have held 7 editions of Human Rights Weeks with your support, talking about women's citizen rights and their support to transitional justice processes and ending impunity and working for justice for survivors. We found in Herat, a city which has no cinema theater, an international women's film festival. We do not know what comes next, do you? What we know is that the Taliban violated the rights of women, girls and minorities. Concepts of femicide and genocide are pertinent on an unimaginable scale the last time round, and continue to do so in many regions where they were still active all these years. And the statements Taliban leaders have made over the past 3 weeks give little hope that things will be better this time. Neo-Talibanism is fake news, and we all know it, unless some are willing to shut their eyes tight and follow whoever dictates what our distorted narrative should be. The EU needs to deal with political realities, the immediate realities that is devastating Afghan lives. No, sir, there will be no women in high-level government posts. There is a return to segregated education. Women are being kept out of the workplace. You need a recent example? The several thousands of Hazara women working in Herat, trying to go to work at the industrial complex. They are poor families. And we know that information may be slow to trickle as human rights defenders and activists are in hiding. No one should be fooled by the Taliban's attempts to reinvent themselves for the 21st century. That is why we, like so many others, alongside my FIDH colleagues and other committed human rights defenders, we are disappointed that the recently passed resolution of the UN Human Rights Council included neither a strong, independent, investigative mechanism nor a sufficient reporting mandate by the Office of the High Commissioner. We welcomed the EU's strong statement objecting to these deficiencies and hope that this statement will be followed by concrete EU-led action during the upcoming September session of the HRC and possibly intersessionally. While you discuss policy about whether the EU should engage the Taliban and under what modalities, should you not be guided by what and who the people of Afghanistan can choose through fair elections as government and its program? Are you not signatories to the Rome Statutes and a stakeholder of the ICC's mandate and its investigations on war crimes and crimes against humanity carried out by the same groups who are terrorizing the vast majority of the people? Is it possible to legitimize the perpetrators of war crimes and human catastrophes? Human rights defenders, including feminist activists and women human rights defenders, continue to remain in Afghanistan and may not be on any list. Their houses are being searched, they are receiving threatening phone calls, they are being visited and questioned by the Taliban about their activities. Member states of the EU must urgently pursue all efforts to evacuate those most vulnerable. The EU has a responsibility under the EU guidelines on human rights defenders to protect those who for years also helped the EU fulfill its human rights and peacemaking objectives in Afghanistan. In addition to ensuring people can leave the country, the EU must issue emergency visas in a way to reflect the complexity of the situation right now in Afghanistan and ensure their protection and welcome once they arrive in Europe. The Taliban's systematic violence against women, commission of war crimes, including the killing of civilians, taking over houses and looting properties, forced marriage, sexual and gender-based violence, and egregious human rights violations all point to a dark future for the women and men of Afghanistan. We, Afghan human rights defenders, activists, feminists, we need the support of the EU. The gains we have made over the last half-century, including this recent 2 decades, are solid. They should not be forgotten or erased. Collective memory cannot be destroyed. Break the silence. When democracy returns to Afghanistan, because it certainly will, the slate will not be wiped clean. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your clear words. We would have liked to welcome right now as next speaker, Madame Sara Karimi, Afghan film director and president of the Afghan Film Organization, who was supposed to join us as well as a speaker today, but unfortunately, due to other pressing issues with her visa, she can't speak now, and we hope she could maybe connect during the debate. And therefore, we are coming to our next speaker, Madame Chiara Adamo, Acting Director for Human Development, Migration, Governance and Peace, Directorate General for International Partnerships, European Commission, whom I already had the pleasure to have as a guest speaker at the joint TV FAM hearing we had right now. So please, the floor is yours right now on this issue that is so much related. So please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I take the mask off while I speak? Thank you. So first of all, I would like to thank both chairs for the timely organization of this session and for inviting us. You heard the ambassador, so this allows me to be briefer, but indeed there have been important tangible achievements for women and girls in Afghanistan, and it is really our priority that this is preserved. The ambassador mentioned education, where the student enrollment has grown more than 8-fold in the last 20 years, whilst girls' education alone, primary to secondary, increased 3-fold in 15 years. Similarly, an increase on the number of women teachers, civil servants, as was mentioned. So that's, of course, the point of departure. And the point of departure is that the EU attaches utmost importance to the safety and security of all Afghans. And our first priority, alongside evacuation, has really been committing to ensure humanitarian assistance, humanitarian access in Afghanistan, and the assurance of the international humanitarian law principles to be respected. We also quadrupled our funds for this. Given the current situation, our development assistance, as you all know, to Afghanistan, which was under programming, a voluminous amount of 1 billion euros for the period 2021-2027, has for now been frozen, as was stated immediately by the Commission President, but also now acted at the GIMNIC. Cooperation will be conditioned and more formal engagement will be conditioned on commitment to human rights, and of course women's and girls' rights are central here. But we have to strike a delicate balance. We cannot leave the Afghan population alone. So we are reviewing the ongoing portfolio on a case-by-case basis. Of course, we have a frozen, put on hold budget support right now, but there are actions including human rights related support and support to non-governmental organizations directly, which can go on and must go on. So in this context, indeed, in the reprogramming, the issue of women's and girls remains imperative in terms of right to health, right to education. We also need to look at the difficult issue of gender-based violence, how to address it. I just would like to remember that we have a consistent spotlight initiative country program in Afghanistan, so we'll have to really in the next days and weeks to decide how to best operate with, and that was mentioned by one of you, also specific attention to what we can do for women human rights defenders in such a context. We are working hand in hand with Team Europe, so with the member states and the UN in this analysis, and also we wish to support regional partners, including the neighbors on Afghan displacement, and there the gender dimension is also key given the specific vulnerabilities of women and girls in migration, so that they continue to benefit from the right to basic services, health and education, but also we all know about the risks for forced displaced population, for being the target of traffickers, or also in terms of gender-based violence, and child protection system will be key. So specific attention, of course, I was mentioning to women human rights defenders more generally, female journalists, teachers, judges and lawyers. These are just to name a few, those who are most at risk right now, looking for safe pathways and credible actions. And there I wanted to mention that we did activate the Protect Defenders EU mechanism, our human rights mechanism for protection, which have been working despite difficult conditions, and also I want to commend their work. They were able to deliver over 100 urgent grants to human rights defenders at risk, which were approved just in the last few weeks. But of course, this is a work which didn't start in August. But there was a specific attention to Afghanistan already in the previous months. So in cooperation with the delegations and with the NGOs, we had been discussing what we call an Afghan window for protection of human rights defenders already for months, which should enable us to also increase the assistance according to the development of the needs. Important also to coordinate with other funds like the Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund. So we are in talks to them to make sure that we can pool efforts together. And finally, as the ambassador and other, I also wanted to acknowledge the millions of Afghan human rights defenders, but also Afghan people and Afghan women, the brave women who decided to remain in Afghanistan, and they are also those who require our support, be it also in terms of shelters, protection networks. I mean, digital security is of course a big issue, which we were working on and must be continued. And in the medium and long term, what I believe also matters is to remember that the support to the institutional capacity of civil society organizations is paramount to make sure that the civil society simply doesn't die in Afghanistan. So, thank you.
Je ne sais pas si on va pouvoir être en connexion avec Sarah, mais dès que vous avez la connexion, faites-nous signe, parce qu'on lui donnera directement la parole. I give the floor now to Claire Daly for the delegation and relation with Afghanistan. You have the floor, Claire.
Thanks very much, Maria, and we're happy to be here only from the point of view that for 20 years a blind eye has been turned on Afghanistan, despite the fact that it has been the most dangerous country in the world for years and one of the poorest. And the truth is, we don't know exactly how the situation will pan out. It's likely a new government will be formed this week. It seems it will encompass other groups outside the Taliban. Whether it will be identical to the last one, we don't know. Nobody knows that. It hasn't happened that. But what we do know is that the Taliban's record has been absolutely brutal in terms of its treatment of women and girls. But sadly, we also know that life in Afghanistan for women and girls now and in the past year and years has been pretty terrible as well, because despite what the speakers from the Commission said, Human Rights Watch, hardly a radical organisation, produced a report, ironically, in August of this year, where they talked about the continuing violence against women being an everyday aspect of life, the child marriages, the honour killings, one of the highest maternal mortality rates, actually making the point that access to education for women and girls has been declining every year since 2014. And this year, only 41% of Afghan girls are excluded actually from all levels of education. So, you know, at the same time, we've been pumping in billions of European taxpayers' money, supposedly building a nation. So we've got to, the first thing I think is draw the lessons from this. And I appreciate the points made by the ambassador at the start. I note some of his points and I can see the logic in them, but I'm wondering why he's asking them now and why was nobody asking them before now. And drawing the lessons is absolutely critical. I think one of the biggest exposés out of this is the fig leaf that the intervention in Afghanistan was about defending the lives of women and girls. Clearly, that has been exposed now as an absolute and utter lie, and we should learn that lesson. But we should concentrate on the things we can control. And, you know, we need a really strong and urgent humanitarian and response to the upcoming migration crisis. We need to work with the neighbouring countries of Pakistan and Iran in particular, but that shouldn't be an alternative to us opening our doors to anybody who worked with us previously in the EU, anybody whose life is in jeopardy, or anybody who wants to come and seek sanctuary in Europe. We've played a part in the destabilisation of the area, and we've a responsibility now to open our doors who they want to come. We also strongly believe that we need to establish a monitoring mechanism regarding respect for human rights. That should be absolutely a precondition for further cooperation in the future. The Afghan authorities, like every others, must respect international law and basic human rights. But lastly, I have to say I'm really heartened by the spirit of the protesting women of Afghanistan. They are the future. It is the people of Afghanistan themselves who will shape their future. We are the ones who can only stand by and assist where we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire. I will give the floor now to the MEPs. As we have more than 16 people willing to have the floor between Femmes and Droit Committee, I will give you just 1 minute, so be clear, be brief, to be sure that we can have the floor for everybody. I know that when I say 1 minute, you are taking 3, so it's 1 minute, and I will take into account your position. But really, if we want to have some answers from the ambassador and other people, I think it's really important to respect your time. And also to know that for the interpretation, if we are not in time, I will ask to have 5 minutes more. And if not, we will conclude in English. OK, Isabelle Wissler pour le PPE.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Il y aurait tellement à dire. Tellement. Je vais commencer par ce qui me tient extrêmement à cœur, c'est-à-dire demander que nous ayons une attitude généreuse par rapport à toutes ces personnes en Afghanistan qui sont en danger, qui demandent et qui ont besoin de notre aide. Quand je dis les personnes, nous parlons aujourd'hui de femmes et de filles, c'est pas pour rien, parce que, quelle que soit la catégorie qu'on nomme, que ce soit les défenseurs des droits de l'homme, les femmes, les juges, les journalistes, les femmes sont plus en danger que les autres en ce moment à cause de la présence, de la prise de pouvoir par les talibans. Je voudrais effectivement nommer les femmes juges parce qu'elles, ils ont déjà dit clairement qu'elles ne pourront pas rester juges, alors pour d'autres catégories, ce n'est pas le cas. Je voudrais aussi dire qu'il y a une vraie prise de conscience que nous, en tant qu'Européens, nous n'avons pas eu la possibilité de faire ce que nous aurions dû d'un point de vue militaire. Et pour que notre action humanitaire soit possible, nous devons avoir les moyens militaires de faire ce que nous avons à faire. Je crois que c'est une leçon que nous devons apprendre entre autres. Je voudrais maintenant quand même venir un moment sur le fait qu'on met en doute ce qu'il y a eu de plus pour les femmes pendant ce temps-là. Madame la Présidente, j'ai toujours respecté le temps. Je le garde, et puis après les autres, 3 fois plus longtemps. Quelques secondes. Donc, la protection des femmes, dire qu'ils ont cherché à protéger les femmes avec ce qu'ils mettent en place, je comprends, j'entends, plutôt j'entends, je ne comprends pas. Parce que c'est en même temps que dire la protection, ils disent aussi l'infériorité qui leur permet ensuite de vraiment écraser les femmes et donc dire aussi que nous avions la même situation avant que celle que nous avons aujourd'hui est absolument inexplicable et inacceptable. Ce n'était pas dans la loi. Et par là même, ils ne pouvaient même pas prétendre à la légitimité, ce qui devient tout à fait différent quand ils sont au pouvoir. Donc nous avons réussi à faire toute une série de choses pendant ces 20 ans. Je vais contre cœur m'arrêter, mais on aura d'autres. Mais dire encore un mot, nous ne pouvons pas quand même non plus couper tous les ponts. Nous ne pouvons pas les reconnaître, les talibans, mais nous ne pouvons pas couper tous les ponts parce qu'il faut que nous puissions faire cette aide humanitaire absolument indispensable. Merci beaucoup.
Elena Yoncheva.
Je vous remercie, Madame la Présidente, de me donner la parole. A lot has been done for the last 20 years for the women's rights and children education, and Andreas von Brandt gave us very clear picture on that. So I have 3 short specific questions for Ambassador von Brandt. First, with the Taliban now in charge, has there been any communication with them to help with the safety of children and women? Or such a communication channel was already in place before? Because we know Taliban, before reaching Kabul, they were already active in rural areas months ago, and they had the control of towns and villages. Therefore, I'd like to ask you whether such working arrangements with them were already established, which can be also maintained in the incoming months, and do you intend, Mr. Ambassador, to have a political contact with the Taliban, not just a technical use, in order to protect the women and children's rights? And second, you evacuated the EU delegation staff members from Afghanistan, but how do you intend to receive reliable information from the ground? I understand the security issue, but in order to have a true picture, big picture, do you think is a possibility to send some EU experts back in the country? And third, we are all worried for incoming deep social economic crisis in Afghanistan. World Bank, International Monetary Fund, European Union have already frozen access to funding for development, especially when it comes to the prospect of women and children. How do you think to keep the supporting programs without sending it through the government? Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. I give the floor to Anna Neumann.
Thank you, Maria Arena. And for those of us who are doing foreign policy and still allow themselves some empathy, these have been emotionally quite challenging weeks, I have to say. We have sat here in recent years so often and encouraged these women in Afghanistan to go on with the fight, knowing the threats they face. We have encouraged them because they are our closest allies, and nothing would have changed in Afghanistan without them doing their own fight. And we have said here in recent months when it was clear that the troops are going to withdraw, telling them, we will not turn our back on you.
And where are we now that the evacuation planes are not flying any longer? We are telling them we are going to negotiate with the Taliban that maybe you can make it to a neighbor country, and then we send some money so that you have enough food. Imagine you are a women's rights defender who fought the Taliban, and people tell you that Pakistan should now be your new home. This is cynical at the best. And I get messages from friends in Kabul telling me that they lock themselves into their apartment, that they are deleting their Twitter feeds, that they are burning their passports because they are more afraid of the Taliban than they have trust in us to get them out. And looking at their situation and also at the responsibility that we have, our ministers of the interior, our heads of states, who are not daring to talk resettlement because they are afraid of some bad opinion polls, while the women in Afghanistan are threatened with their life. I think we really need to make sure from this committee, but also from the plenary next week, that our role as the European Union is to take responsibility, to support and protect those who want to continue the fight in Afghanistan with a fact-finding mission and with making very sure that our key priority in negotiations with Taliban is women's and girls' rights, to talk serious resettlement for those who want to leave, and I'm talking about tens of thousands, and that we treat them with dignity once they are here, because those who made it out as of now, they are still stuck in some camps, not allowed to leave them. And this really is not what we owe the strong and brave women's rights defenders of Afghanistan.
Thank you, Anna. I give the floor to Asita Kanko. She's connected, I think.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to thank you for organizing this meeting together with FEM and ROA. It's very important to discuss this issue together. I would like to stress the fact that the Taliban, of course, have not changed. These are still the same guys motivated by the same ideology that hates women and wants to put them out of schools and keep them in the homes to serve them without ever having their own life. They have not changed. What have changed is the fact that they are now doing public relations, and we should not let them convince us, but we should also keep an eye on everything that is happening between the West and the Taliban. I am, for example, very worried by the fact that we are speaking of having a deal with countries like Iran. I think sending women and girls from Afghanistan to a place like Iran is complicity for misogyny. Women who are scared of the Taliban will also rightly be scared of the Ayatollahs in Iran. And another point that I would like to stress is that we are speaking a lot about this situation, but I would like to know from the Commission, how exactly are you going to help women and girls in Afghanistan without at the same time legitimating what is happening, legitimating the current leadership of the Taliban over there? And second, how are we going to make sure that this kind of foreign policy failure does not happen again in the future? And what will we do with the lessons learned? Because obviously this was totally avoidable. Thank you.
Thank you, Asita. I give the floor to Samira from Renew, Samira Rafael. You have the floor, Samira. Rafaela Samira. Yeah, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and I hope that you can take into consideration that I'm speaking as a DROA member, but also as the FEM coordinator. Afghanistan has become a hell for women and girls. Beatings, Taliban door-to-door searches, and targeted killings. This is now what daily life is like for thousands of women and girls in Afghanistan. And Taliban commanders have demanded community leaders to hand over a list of girls over 15 years of age and widows under 45 to become wives for their fighters. And thousands of women are essentially forced to sexual slavery. Women are now forced to cover their body from head to toe in public, banned from their schools, universities, and jobs, and the guardian must accompany them at all times. Women are subject to extreme punishment or even death for violating codes of Sharia law. The facts speak for themselves. So let's not pretend as if the Taliban is a better version of itself these days. I can guarantee you, as a woman who grew up as a Muslim herself, the Taliban doesn't have the same version we have. Let's look at the facts. rather than their hollow statements or believe them. So to the European Commission, don't be naive. Don't legitimize their version of women's rights in Islam. The violations of women's rights may not go unpunished. There must be no impunity for acts of sexual violence and deprivation of fundamental rights. Targeting civilians, especially children and their schools, is a war crime and violation of international humanitarian law. We should put sanctions into place if this happens. The European Union has a great responsibility in protecting Afghan women and girls, but now is not the time for the international community to turn its back on Afghanistan.
Samiha,
so it
we
is
have
essential,
to close.
I'm finishing now, it is essential that we can hold human rights perpetrators accountable, and we will never abandon the women and girls left behind and leave them without hope. We will stand with you. Thank you.
I give the floor to Miguel Urban Crespo. Yeah, you have the floor, Miguel.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair.
La verdad es que no podemos seguir con palabras bonitas y vacías. No podemos relativizar el riesgo que enfrentan las mujeres afganas como hemos visto aquí en esta sala, ni creer las bonitas promesas y palabras de los talibanes. La ocupación militar colonialista solo ha dejado miseria y corrupción. Su presunta tolerancia ante el régimen talibán no hará más que empeorar esta situación. Hay que garantizar la salida segura del país de cualquier persona que lo desee si se encuentra en peligro, especialmente de las mujeres y otros colectivos en situación de vulnerabilidad, como el colectivo LGTBI o las personas defensoras de los derechos humanos. No les podemos dejar tirados. Visas humanitarias, corredores seguros, acogida digna, no más Moria, no más externalización de fronteras a terceros países para que hagan el trabajo sucio de control de fronteras, no más vuelos de deportación y, por supuesto, apoyar a quienes resisten desde dentro, apoyo económico y reconocimiento a estas mujeres que están protestando para mantener sus derechos, exigiendo que ningún gobierno reconozca la legitimidad del régimen misógino talibán. Y no queríamos tardar, simplemente una pregunta para la Comisión, señora Presidenta. ¿Qué van a hacer justamente con los miles de afganos que tenemos a las puertas de Europa? Con los miles de afganos que están pidiendo ahora mismo asilo en las Islas Griegas. Queríamos saber eso por parte de la Comisión. Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
The next one is Kostas Papatakis.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, we listened to pretexts and shedding of crocodile tears for the Afghan people and especially for the rights of women by the United States, EU, NATO, as well as the governments. They had used the same pretext 20 years ago in order to justify the imperialist intervention and the occupying army that left behind thousands of dead refugees, as well as poverty and misery for the people and women. Before, in the 80s, they supported and financed the obscurantist mujahideens from whom the Taliban were emerged as liberators. They funded and armed them to overthrow the popular government that legislated equal rights of men and women, where women were given the opportunity to hold positions of government, to become scientists and participate in the production process. Today, the Taliban have been rearmed by the United States, giving them the governance and are seen as potential partners by the EU. The only winners are the big business groups that have found fertile ground to exploit a country rich in wealth-producing resources, which has a key role and great geopolitical importance.
Thank you. I give the floor now to my colleague, Evelyn Regner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. We continue with the list of speakers. With Peter van Dalen, EPP, followed by Maria Neuchel, SND.
Dank u wel, mevrouw de voorzitter. En ook hartelijk bedankt aan de ambassadeur dat hij in ons midden is. Voorzitter, wij kunnen natuurlijk allemaal achteraf precies verklaren hoe het allemaal zit. En we weten allemaal hoe het is. Maar laten we eens even bij stilstaan de enorme ellende waarin dit land nu verkeert. Het was toch wel heel veelzeggend dat de eerste conferentie die de Taliban hebben gemaakt ging over onderwijs. Dat betekent dat het onderwijs volledig op zijn kop zal gaan, voorzitter. Ten nadele van vrouwen en meisjes. En ik vrees ook dat de Taliban in Afghanistan nog veel steun hebben, want het land is vrij snel omgegaan richting de Taliban. En zeker op het platteland zullen ze nog veel steun hebben. Ik heb één vraag aan de ambassadeur. Welke concrete middelen hebben wij om de Taliban nog op een andere koers te brengen? Of om ze af te remmen? Of kunnen ze al onze verklaringen gebruiken als wc-papier?
To hold the Taliban accountable. They can say what they like, but how can you hold them accountable? Maria Nocha, please.
Ganz herzlichen Dank. Ja, herzlichen Dank für die Informationen. Ich möchte eigentlich den Bogen etwas weiterspannen. Es gibt weltweit immer kritischere Punkte, religiöse, fundamentalistische Männergruppen. Ich sage es mir so ganz einfach, eindeutig. Die bedrohen uns Frauen wirklich auf ganzer Linie. Für mich ist die Frage nicht nur, wie es in Afghanistan weitergeht, sondern für mich ist genauso die Frage, wie es in vielen anderen Ländern weitergeht, mit Gruppen, die nicht das Recht und das Gesetz oben drüber schreiben, sondern die eigentlich religiös motiviert sind und die vor allen Dingen ohne mit der Wimper zu zucken Frauenrechte missachten. Mich würde es weitaus mehr interessieren, wie gehen wir insgesamt mit der Situation um. Das in Afghanistan ist eine wahnsinnige Katastrophe, aber es ist nicht leider nicht die einzige Katastrophe weltweit. Und wir müssen hier einen Umgang insgesamt finden mit so fundamentalistischen Gruppen, die religiös motiviert sind.
Vielen Dank, Maria, für diese Frage. Next speaker is Heidi Hautala, followed by Jessica Stegroth. So Heidi, I hope you're connected or you're present in the room. Yes, we can see you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Chair. Yes, Ambassador, with all respect to what you have said, that there's no need for alarmism and things didn't change overnight. But the message is that many of us receive from friends and acquaintances of acquaintances from Afghanistan show that the situation has changed overnight and the threats to women and intellectuals, journalists have become so sharp that we can only think of how to help them to get out of the hands of these brutal killers and murderers. The murders are reported every hour. So you didn't really speak about this. You were speaking about how well we were able to evacuate our own. Yes, certainly. But what is going on together with the member states? How is it coordinated that we can address the situation of people on the ground?
Thank you very much, Heidi. Now Jessica Stegroth, followed by Maria Eugenia Rodriguez Palop.
Tack så mycket för ordet. Ja, trots 20 år av militärt och ekonomiskt stöd från västvärlden så lyckades talibanerna på bara några dagar återta kontrollen. Enbart Sverige har de senaste 10 åren betalat cirka 14 miljarder kronor i bistånd och mycket av biståndet har dessvärre försvunnit i korruption. Mycket resurser har gått till utbildningsinsatser gällande mansnormer, genus och kvinnors rättigheter. Liksom olika demokratifrämjande åtgärder. Allt med syfte att exportera västerländska liberala värderingar till Afghanistan. Trots detta har nu talibanerna på bara några veckor dragit utvecklingen tillbaka, bakåt i tiden igen. Verkligheten och utvärderingar visar tydligt att alla åtgärder och miljarder bistånd inte haft någon bestående effekt. Bland annat för att man haft lite kunskap om det afghanska samhället och dess klanstrukturer, liksom man haft en övertro på att fundamentalistisk islam kunnat reformeras. Och gällande insatser som många länder och EU nu vill göra såklart, så hör jag bara mer av samma medicin. Mer bistånd, mer utbildningsinsatser för jämställdhet, etc. mer av samma medicin. På vilket sätt kommer det hjälpa? Behöver vi inte tänka nytt? Dra några lärdomar? Det är min fråga till panelen. Vilka lärdomar ska vi dra för att kunna göra det bättre framöver?
Thank you, Maria Eugenia Rodriguez-Palop, followed by Stelios Kimporopoulos. Please.
Bueno, pues son muchas las cosas que ya se han dicho aquí. Está claro que el régimen talibán practica el apartheid de género. Es un régimen genocida por razón de sexo y utiliza además a las mujeres como botín de guerra. Sabemos que las están obligando a casarse, lo que significa básicamente que las obligan a someterse a la esclavitud sexual. Y lo que queremos es lo que algunos ya han mencionado acá. Queremos corredores humanitarios, concesión de visados humanitarios y de asilo, procedimientos rápidos y eficaces para que se pueda pedir el asilo en embajadas y consulados. Queremos que Afganistán no sea un país seguro, paralizar las devoluciones y reasentar a las personas refugiadas actualmente retenidas en campos europeos. Y además queremos que las solicitudes de asilo, como indica el derecho internacional, se examinen con enfoque de género, articulando estas solicitudes sobre todo a partir de la violencia específica que sufren las mujeres. Finalmente, una partida económica extraordinaria para apoyar a los países económicamente y para apoyar también económica y técnicamente a las organizaciones no gubernamentales que trabajan en los países vecinos de Afganistán, que son los que más esfuerzo están haciendo en este momento. Todo esto lo exige el derecho internacional y la normativa comunitaria. No es solamente una cuestión de solidaridad. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. So now it's Stelios Kimporopoulos, followed by Helen Fritzon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, dear colleagues. I think that I would like to thank all the distinguished guests that had their speaking today, because I think that this is a very crucial meeting, because this is a critical moment to stand very concrete next to every woman and girl of Afghanistan who needs to defend and protect their rights from abuses of great scale and magnitude. We read in the United Nations report this July that more women were killed and wounded in Afghanistan in the first half of 2021 than in the first 6 months of any year since 2009. And this is only the beginning. In addition, numerous civilians, among them women and girls, are being displaced, and many of them experience incidents of extortion by armed groups and explosions on major roads. In order to avoid the repetition of the uncontrolled and irregular massive migration flows of 2015, there is an urgent need to address the problem in its roots and to support the refugees closer to Afghanistan, as the neighboring countries are safe. Further, in case of migration flows in the EU, it is vital that they are equally distributed among all member states. Cooperation with third countries is essential to prevent human smuggling and trafficking, especially with Turkey. We need to be efficient and fast if we want to help all these people and prevent a new migration wave. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And now Helen Fritzon, followed by Margarita Della Pisa. And the last speaker then will be Pina Picerno. And I say already in advance, thank you to all of you right now that you're really respecting so much the time. We would like to listen to the ambassador's answer. So please, Helen.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I promise to be short. Yes, and first of all, thank you to all the speakers for your important contributions. As everyone else expresses in this meeting, I'm deeply worried about the people of Afghanistan, and in particular, Afghan women and girls, mothers and daughters. I'm concerned about their fundamental human rights, about the future. Horrified Afghan women are sharing their worries and fears with the world, and now we must listen. We must listen to every word, and we need to push for women's full participation in decision-making, in local and national political life, as well as ensure it in the global response. So again, thank you all for being here with us today. We can make the difference. You have made it clear, women's, girls and rights must be at the core of the response to the situation in Afghanistan. Thank you very much, Evelyn.
Thank you so much, Hélène. And now, Margarita de la Pisa.
Muchas gracias por darme la palabra. Se necesita implicación internacional en situaciones de injusticia en los delitos de lesa humanidad como sufre hoy Afganistán. Debemos preguntarnos si se está actuando realmente allí donde no se respetan los más fundamentales derechos humanos. Todas estas prácticas de las que estamos siendo testigos responden a una barbarie ideológica incomprensible desde una sana conciencia guiada por la razón. Nuestra cultura de base cristiana nos ha permitido que estas injusticias, nos ha prevenido de estas injusticias, ya que la igualdad la libertad y la dignidad de las personas son unos de sus fundamentos. La infravaloración de la mujer, la limitación de su personalidad, la coacción que sufre, el desprecio a su vida y a su libertad, cualquier forma de abuso y maltrato merece nuestro más profundo rechazo y preocupación. Y es en estas circunstancias donde debemos actuar siempre y en todo lugar, no solo cuando la situación es sangrante. Tristemente, son muchas las ocasiones donde el feminismo radical ha permanecido paralizado. Sirve a intereses de lobbies ideológicos y no al de mujeres en situaciones difíciles. Esta debería ser la preocupación y la bandera de los movimientos a favor de la mujer. Esta tragedia de terror y brutalidad merecía un plan de contingencia más decidido por parte de Europa, que en muchas oquesiones es tímida a la hora de manifestarse contra los radicalismos fundamentalistas, dándoles así carta de naturaleza. Me gustaría saber qué estrategia liderará la Unión Europea ante tales amenazas. Espero que no se quede en un activismo cínico en declaraciones que solo pretende sacar rédito político y acallar las conciencias.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now Pina. Please, Pina Piccini.
Grazie Presidente. In queste ore, lo abbiamo detto, le donne afghane coraggiosamente sono scese in piazza per chiedere diritti, parità, lavoro e la possibilità di non abbandonare i percorsi che sono stati intrapresi durante gli anni passati. Sappiamo che la repressione dei talebani si è abbattuta su di loro in maniera drammatica, in maniera violenta, in particolare nelle province fuori da Kabul. E allora, oltre alla solidarietà scontata, credo che sia opportuno in questa fase, soprattutto ambasciatore, mettere al centro dell'agenda europea un programma di protezione internazionale per le donne afghane, chiedendo a tutti gli attori internazionali un monitoraggio costante che attivi anche dei corridoi umanitari per evitare azioni di vendetta sulle attiviste che sono rimaste in patria. Troppo spesso è mancata una voce compatta, comune in materia di difesa e di politica estera europea. Invertiamo la tendenza partendo dai diritti delle donne afghane e con il loro coraggio ci chiedono di non lasciarle sole, presidenti e ambasciatori, anche quando i talebani cercheranno il dialogo e cercheranno accordi commerciali.
Enter into dialogue with us and sign trade deals. So let's bear that in mind.
I'll give the floor now to the ambassador and perhaps to the Commission to answer the different questions that we have had. Unfortunately, we won't have time to give the floor to the Afghan representative, but we will continue to work with them for the future of our subcommittee and also for the future of the situation in Afghanistan. So, Mr. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I try to be extremely brief. To begin with, Sherazad, I know her very well, respect her very much, and I agree with her that she knows more about Afghanistan than myself. Having said that, I'm impressed and gratified by all your interest in Afghanistan. I would say that has not always, and I'm not referring to the European Parliament, but I would say in general, we have lost a bit interest in Afghanistan in recent 5 years. And let's also not forget that our member states, our home countries, have, to a certain extent, at least those as NATO allies, agreed to the US Taliban deal, to the withdrawal. And so this is not in a kind of a political, it's not happening outside of the political realm. And what I would also say is that usually when it's about lessons learned, when it comes to lessons learned, most people, entities, researchers would claim that we have been too ambitious, that we should be more realistic, that you cannot impose the Western will on societies, whatever that is. So here I'm a bit, it's challenging to find the right balance, because on the one hand, one could say all of the work on human rights has probably been a bit too much, if you take this at least argument. So we're getting a lot of criticism for having worked too much on those rights and human rights issues, and probably not enough on the hardcore military and others. It's not my personal view. I'm just saying it is difficult to strike the balance here. So on the specific questions, what I meant by no alarmism is to treat a political actor not by what the entity has said 25 years ago, but to look at what is happening now. And most of what is happening, and rightly so, and if I was a woman in Afghanistan, I would probably leave immediately and would have the same level of anxiety. But what is mostly happening at the moment is based on fear what's coming. All I wanted to say is let's not lose sight what is not yet happening. And let's not always go back into history and say what happened in 96, 97, 98. Perhaps, and I hope so, we have a chance to still influence things. And I come to that in a second, how I think this is still possible. Why the lessons learned only now? This is probably not up for me to decide, but of course we were still very much into the business until 2 weeks ago. I know that there have been in various member states calls for lessons learned process, even when the withdrawal happened. I mean, when the first kind of drawdown happened in 2014, but that's for others to decide or to comment on. I think it will be useful now. It could have been useful even in previous years. Do we have contacts with the Taliban? Yes, of course. We have contacts at Doha over the last 2 years. The place of the so-called peace process, and we still have contacts there in Doha, but I have them, we all have them at the delegation level, actually on a daily basis, and the criterion of keeping women engaged in our humanitarian, allowed basically, and keep women participating in our humanitarian assistance and our political work is the key and the core of our requests. What tools do we have? That's a very difficult question, but I would say the potential recognition of the de facto regime, the development assistance in case we decide to go on with development assistance, the international exposure, naming and shaming. You know that, and I think the Taliban are very keen on having a relationship with the outside world. So there, I think we have our levers. I would say the question on the region. I think the region is not a pretext to shy away from the problem. The region is actually key. It has always been key. Maybe it has been neglected a bit. Let's not forget the origins of the Taliban movement. Let's not forget the different interests of the region. And so I think we now have to work a lot with the regions, quite simply because there is no longer a NATO presence. We ourselves are currently not on the ground, but also in general, the region has to be taken very seriously. The further questions are, there were a lot of comments, so I'm not necessarily commenting on the comments, but maybe as a final point on do I believe or is there something, such thing as the new Taliban? This is at least not what I wanted to comment on. I think the future will show. I'm not naive, and I think ideologically and, if you wish, religiously, the Taliban have not changed. But what that means for the specific implementation of their government policies, of the implementation of their assistance, we'll have to see. And I think also when it comes to the question of the return, also not for me to decide. And what I can say, though, is there is a great awareness. There's a great awareness for the need to be on the ground again. In what capacity, with how many people, at what point, remains to be seen. But again, we have these contacts in Doha, and we are looking into possibilities to also be back at some point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know if Chiara wanted to say something more. You have the floor. No, you don't want. Yeah.
No, just to thank you for this debate. I'm sure it's just the first of a number, but I think the ambassador recap it perfectly. Again, I mean, our urgency now is really to make sure that we can prioritize urgent assistance to Afghans in need and Afghans at risk. And as he mentioned, we need to use fully our toolbox, meaning leverage our cooperation, and we now have clear also benchmarks and conditions for it, but also make sure that, as someone mentioned, the light doesn't go off, that we keep the political pressure. So, of course, the role of this parliament is crucial. Maybe just to reply, because there were a lot of questions related to Afghans in Europe and visas, etc. You might, of course, have seen that there was an extraordinary JAI Council with the interior ministers discussing about it. I believe it was 31st of August last week. In their declaration, they stressed the need really to coordinate with international partners, the UN and agencies, ensure humanitarian aid to women and children, but also as part of global efforts, support to be provided in the form of resettlement on a voluntary basis. So I know that Commissioner Johnson is discussing with the interior ministers about a possible coordination and pledges by the end of this month. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the Council of the Interior Minister declared that they want to use Pakistan and Iran as countries to protect Afghan people leaving the country. And I'm not sure that these countries are really in the right place to protect women's and girls when it comes to their rights. So I prefer not to mention the Homes Minister Council on this, but perhaps we will continue to work on this and how to protect really women's rights when they decided to go outside Afghanistan. But thank you very much for your work, and we will continue on the Afghanistan issue. Thank you, and thank you for the FEM committee also. And we will have a break now, and we will start again with the number 5 on the agenda. It is about Cuba. So, thank you.
The same on behalf of FAM Committee. Thanks for all those brave and fantastic women's rights defenders, and that we just did that right now so that the issue remains in the focus. So the thanks are also to the Trois. And we, in the FAM Committee, will continue at 4:45 with the next point of the agenda.